Right now on Capitol Hill, senators are in the so-called vote-a-rama. They're voting on amendments to President Trump's key policy bill of his second term. A final vote is expected later tonight. At least two Republicans have indicated that they will oppose the bill. But where do things stack up on what's in the bill versus what we've heard from the Trump administration? Also, there is the House version. There's a lot to sift through, so we want to bring in our senior reporter, Daniel Dale, who joins us now for a fact check. Hi, Daniel. So let's start with what the president has said on Medicaid. How does that compare to what's actually in this bill?
Some of the president's recent comments, Pamela, have been wildly categorically inaccurate. Listen, for example, to something he said last week.
We're cutting $1.7 trillion in this bill, and you're not going to feel any of it. And your Medicaid is left alone. It's left the same. Your Medicare and your Social Security are strengthened. We're not cutting.
Whatever the merits of this legislation, and whatever the merits, and you can certainly defend this legislation as Republicans have been doing, it objectively does not leave Medicaid the same. It is objective fact that this legislation makes major changes and indeed major cuts to Medicaid. So what kinds of changes are we talking about? Well, one of them that has received a lot of discussion is a work requirement, specifically a requirement that many recipients considered able-bodied who do not have young children prove that they are working or in school or in job training or volunteering 80+ hours a month. That's not the only big change. The legislation would require for the first time certain Medicaid enrollees to pay out of pocket for certain health services. There would be significant changes to the so-called provider tax that rural hospitals warn could force the closure of some of them or require significant cuts in care. It imposes additional administrative burdens on people and states. So again, good or bad, defend it or not defend it, this is big stuff. And how big? Well, the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office says we're talking $930 billion cut in federal support for Medicaid over 10 years. That is the biggest Medicaid cut in history, according to many experts. And that would, of course, impact real people. This nonpartisan CBO estimates that we're talking about 11.8 million additional uninsured people in 2034 as a result of this legislation. Not all of it as a result of people losing Medicaid, but many of that 11.8 million would be people now on Medicaid who wouldn't be.
And Daniel, what about the president's promise of no tax on Social Security benefits?
Yeah, so Wolf, the president keeps talking and posting on social media as if this legislation would fulfill his major campaign promise to completely eliminate tax on Social Security. It simply would not. It does not eliminate tax on Social Security. Many seniors would still be paying it. Now, what the legislation does do is provide an additional tax deduction for seniors. It would be a $4,000 additional deduction in the House version, $6,000 additional deduction in the Senate version. That is, of course, something. It is certainly a step toward the president's campaign promise, but no, it does not completely satisfy that no tax on Social Security pledge.
What about what the president said during the campaign, the no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime? And the president has said that passing this bill could also result in a historic tax hike for some. What do we know there?
Yeah, so he keeps using this 68% figure. I want you to listen to something else he said last week.
Well, look, it's a great bill. It's a massive tax cut. If it's not approved, your taxes will go up by 68%. Think of that, 68, a record, the highest in the history. The Democrats won't approve it only because politically it's so good for the Republicans. The Democrats aren't approving it. But think of what they're not approving. They're not approving border security. We've done a great job at the border, but we have to add some wall. We have to do various things. We have no money for that.
This 68% figure is fiction, and it is such fiction that the White House wouldn't even defend it on condition of anonymity when I asked for comment. No defense whatsoever. There is no credible estimate that not passing this legislation would produce a 68% tax hike. Now, the nonpartisan think tank, the Tax Policy Center, did say that there would be an average tax hike of about 7.5% if this bill didn't pass as a result of certain provisions from the 2017 Trump tax law being allowed to expire. And they also said that about 64% of households would face some sort of tax increase if the bill didn't pass. But again, 64% of households getting some tax increase is not synonymous, guys, with a 68% or even 64% tax hike. It's just not the same thing.
Our excellent fact checker, Daniel Dale, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And new this morning, Wolf, a Trump administration probe of Harvard University has found the school, quote, in violent violation of the Civil Rights Act. CNN has obtained a letter sent to the president of Harvard alleging tolerance for anti-Semitic behavior. I want to go now to senior reporter Betsy Klein at the White House. Take us through what's happening here, Betsy.
Well, Pamela, it's really a stunning development because it was just 10 days ago that President Trump himself said that a deal with Harvard University was in sight, could happen by the end of this month. And now his administration is saying that Harvard is in violation of the Civil Rights Act. So the task force to combat anti-Semitism, a multi-agency effort within the Trump administration, has completed its investigation into Title VI and Harvard's compliance with that. And what Title VI says is it prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin from any programs or entities receiving federal funding. And that investigation has concluded, as you mentioned, that Harvard is in violent violation, it says, of that Title VI. Now, Harvard, according to this letter from the task force, quote, has been in some cases deliberately indifferent and in others has been a willful participant in anti-Semitic harassment of Jewish students, faculty, and staff. For instance, it points to Jewish students being assaulted and spit on campus. There is imagery on campus, it says, trafficked in anti-Semitic tropes. There's also an encampment during those initial protests of the October 7th Hamas attacks on Israel that it says instilled fear in Jewish students. Now, the letter goes on to say that failure to make immediate changes will result in the loss of all federal financial resources. Now, this just marks the latest intensification. The Trump administration is embroiled in 2 different lawsuits with Harvard University, but it also comes, as I mentioned, the president said on July 20th that Harvard had been acting extremely appropriately and they were on the verge of a historic settlement. Of course, that seems far from in place. We are now learning that negotiations have broken down over recent days, but talks with Columbia University, which is facing similar investigations, are continuing. Pamela.
All right, Betsy Klein from the White House for us. Thanks so much. Wolf.